Hi, I'm Dave Karger. Thanks for staying with me tonight on TCM. Up next, we're winding down our spotlight on Steve Martin with a film that marked a dramatic change of pace in his career. Literally. It's a drama, not a comedy, and it's also a musical. From MGM in 1981, Pennies from Heaven. Steve Martin plays Arthur Parker, a frustrated sheet music salesman whose business fails during the Depression and whose marriage is also falling apart. As real life becomes more and more unbearable, Arthur escapes into imagined musical fantasies set to the 1930s songs that he peddles. Pennies from Heaven was adapted from a 6-part series produced by the BBC in 1978 and starring Bob Hoskins. It eventually made its way to the U.S., where it aired on PBS stations across the country. When Steve Martin first saw the series, he said he couldn't believe it. It was, in his words, the greatest thing I've ever seen. What especially moved him was the idea of a character who just wanted to live in that kind of world that his favorite songs promised. But despite his enthusiasm for the project, Steve Martin was not the obvious choice to play Arthur Parker in this film. He was one of the most popular stand-up comedians of the era, and he had just scored a box office hit with his first starring role in the 1979 comedy The Jerk. But he wasn't a dramatic actor or a musical star. Still, when Martin met with director Herbert Ross and screenwriter Dennis Potter, who had also written the BBC series, he showed them just how ready he was to take on this challenge. Potter recalled, Steve started talking about Arthur, what he felt about the part. As he talked, he actually put on a hat and did a tentative dance. He instinctively understood Arthur, and from that moment on, I had no doubt. Along with Steve Martin, the cast includes Bernadette Peters and Christopher Walken, and although they all dance in the film, you won't hear them sing. They lip-sync along 2 tunes from the 1930s, sung by popular singers of the era. From MGM in 1981, with Oscar-nominated costumes by our friend Bob Mackie, this is Pennies from Heaven. Steve Martin had only starred in one other movie before Pennies from Heaven, and it was the 1979 comedy The Jerk, inspired by his wildly popular stand-up act. Audiences were not ready to see him switch gears so abruptly and star in a dark musical drama, and the film became a box office flop. Still, it did earn 3 Oscar nominations, for Best Screenplay by Dennis Potter, who adapted it from his own BBC series, and for Best Sound and Costumes. As I mentioned before the movie, the costumes were designed by the legendary Bob Mackie, and this was his 3rd Oscar nomination. For Steve Martin, the initial negative response to Pennies from Heaven was disappointing, but he's always held this film in high regard, and over time its reputation has grown. As he put it in an interview with Rolling Stone soon after the movie premiered, the thrill for me is when a sympathetic person watches this film and gets the same feeling I had when I saw the BBC version. Up next is a movie that easily could have inspired Arthur Parker, a 1940 musical starring Fred Astaire and Eleanor Powell.
Next on TCM, Broadway Melody of 1940, then Gold Diggers of 1935, and later, Come to Dinner. Get it while it's hot on TCM tonight.